God. Y'all, so if you're not watching this, you should, but I've got hats. So I
Uh-huh.
know I always talk about this and I want to give credit where credit is due. So there's these stigma hats that are white. They're the word stigmas lowercase written in red, and there's a red line going through the middle. These hats belong to WISP, and then on the back it says hellowisp.org or WISP. Ooh, I don't remember. I think it's just the logo. It may just be the logo. But those hats are such a hit. And like I was like, hey, let's do something together. Let's do something together. And unfortunately, I do everything myself and I'm very impatient and I will let it linger if I don't. So I had to do my own thing that was completely different. And I wasn't liking this. I just have the word stigma because this podcast is now known as the Stigma Minimization Podcast, which is a podcast by Something Positive for Positive People, right?
Yeah.
So the design, I let my designer know. Shout out to Jenny Menzel. And I told her, I was like, hey, I want to emphasize this stigma minimization. Like I thought about the S being big and then like the rest of the letters kind of
Going
shrinking
down.
down
Yeah.
to minimize stigma. But she
Mhm.
came up with this idea of the word fading. And so seeing it on design, like you have to change each color for the gradient to just kind of make it go away. And
Yeah.
I didn't see it do that until just now when we came on camera. I put the hat on. I was like, oh my God, it did it. So I'm very excited now about
It's
it
so
because
good. I mean, you gotta go
thank
with
you.
Sigma.
Yeah.
It's
So
really
like
good.
and the STI stands out too. I'm confusing
Yeah,
my right and
yeah.
my left on the screen, but like the
Right.
STI, and then you see the GMA, and you're like,
Yeah.
what's that? Because I was like, man, I'm shining stigma, man, or I'm illuminating it because it's like reflective, but it's
But it
doing
does,
what,
yeah.
yeah, it's doing what it's supposed
Jenny's
to do.
brilliant.
Oh my God. Okay, okay, it's growing on me. It was not at first, I was like, I don't think I like this. I only got one hat, three shirts, and then a hoodie made just for myself to kind of see what it looked like, what it felt like. And I think I'm on board with this. I can
I'm
do
digging
this.
it. I
Yeah,
think it's
thank you.
great.
Okay, so welcome to Something Positive for Positive People. I'm Courtney Brame. Something Positive for Positive People is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that supports people navigating herpes stigma. We also just added the 2024 herpes survey data on the spfpp.org/data tab. All you need to do is go to the website. You don't need to give me your email address anymore. Like, you don't have to register for the conference, which if you do register for the conference, you'll get 4 different videos on the topics of stigma in healthcare, stigma in the mental health field. You'll also get stigma minimization in sexuality education presentation, and then you'll get me delivering the descriptive analysis of that survey data. The survey data itself covers outbreaks, the topic of how long they last, what the triggers are, what the treatments are, alternative treatment options, safe sex practices, disclosing sex and relationships with herpes, and then of course the mental health component of stigma. As I mentioned earlier, like we've been calling ourselves at Something Positive for Positive People for this podcast, the Stigma Minimization Podcast, because that's what we're doing. We're aiming to minimize stigma through the lived experiences and stories of people who've been diagnosed with herpes. And we just want to really humanize the people who have this virus rather than people having the projection of herpes virus into their identity. All right. A couple of quick announcements. So, September, well, no, I don't need to mention that one, but in on September 14th through 18th, I think that's what it is. We'll be at the STI Prevention Conference in Atlanta. We have a table set up. I will be selling some of these stigma hats and shirts at the conference. I'll have a table set up. I'll be there with one of my board members, two of my board members, actually, Jordan Donnell and Dr. Eveline Molina Dacker. We'll all have tables set
Hacker.
up. Yeah, you do know Dr.
I
Dacker. Yeah,
do. Yeah, yeah.
all right. So we have a guest, by the way, but I'll let her introduce herself soon. And after that, we have the Safe Sex Expo in New York City. And the whole idea of the Safe Sex Expo in New York City is to help people have better communication in regards to sex from a safety and pleasure perspective. So much of STI prevention is like wear condoms, get tested, right? But there really is no information on how to navigate those conversations. And what we're learning as we talk to more people with herpes is that they wish they had better communication skills from their sex education as youth that would have nothing to do with sex, actually, that if they had, would have translated into their sexual lives, such as communicating consent, boundaries, accountability, support if needed, and being able to identify healthy versus abusive relationships, being able to say and hear no, and responding to that. So this is on September 29th in New York City. Tickets are on sale for $40. We got a day of workshops. There's 4 workshops, 2 of which are from board members, Dr. Evelyn Dacker and Jordan Donnell. And then we have sex educators Steph Zapata and Dakota Rampin, who will all be presenting on some fun stuff. Like it's not like you're going to sit here in a seminar. Like it's very interactive and engaging, and we're really pumping up the communication component where you can talk with your partners, whether you're in a relationship, whether you're single and dating, whether you're single and not dating, because the most important relationship that we do have is the one with ourselves, and being able to have the communication skills to recognize those needs for ourselves so that we can share those with a partner is super important. So, with that being said, oh, and then there's Herpes Awareness Day, October 13th. I'm putting that together. So if you're just on the website, if you're on the newsletter, you'll get updates about that. All right, let's get into the podcast episode. So, Mel, I have you here. I would like to first off, thank you. Because I know what some of the conversations are going to be that we're going to get into naturally, for being willing to come onto the podcast, for being willing to share your face. Excuse the cats running around in the background. Um, and I want to let you just introduce yourself the way that you would like to introduce yourself, and then share how you and I connected, and then I'll just go from there.
Sure. Wow. Well, thank you, Courtney, for doing what you do. This is my heart goes out to you for being vulnerable enough to create something like this for people. I mean, it's huge. Um, so let's see. My name is Melanie Moseley. I go by Mel. I was talking to Courtney a little earlier. Like my life mission is about spreading the gospel of sex positivity. And how I go about that is I have a couple of one-woman shows that I've written. They're musicals. One is called Sexology the Musical. I toured that from Portland, Oregon to Portland, Maine in 2019, and it's something that I continue to do, and a couple of others that I'm in development with. I also work for an organization called Among Friends that teaches caregivers of people with intellectual and developmental diversity about their sexual and relational health and rights. So it's important to me that everybody has a healthy and safe and expansive sexual life and relational life that they want. And that to me is really related to the work that you do. Um, so yeah, and I also work with Evelyn Dacker, Dr. Evelyn Dacker. We are working on we're doing a week-long or weekend workshop, a long weekend called Journey to the Wild Woman for menopausal women, peri and postmenopausal women to get together and kind of explore where they are at that point in their lives and how we manage our sexuality, our relationships, the changes in our bodies, all of those things during that time. Yeah. So that's where we intersect. Also, we intersected during it with Among Friends. So you came to a workshop that we were teaching at Among Friends, and that's, I think, where I first met you.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for covering me while I was trying to like hit the unmute button. I
That's all
was like,
right.
where? Oh, I
I
accidentally hit
can't
something
get
else.
it.
Yeah. And that is how we connected. So the Among Friends organization, I had someone, I was very curious about it and interested in getting that education because there's a lot of diversity in the world of sexuality education. And I think so many people think when they hear sex education, they hear intercourse or they think intercourse education. And that's not the case. And we think about man, woman, penis, vagina, pregnancy, STIs. And that's like the extent of it. But that's when you lock into just that, you miss this whole spectrum of what is important, and some of those things being the communication components. And when we talk about communicating about sexual health status relationships, we also have to talk about the accessibility of the ability to communicate and different communication styles. So that having this understanding, and I mentioned this to you earlier, being from what my background is, a lot of what I've been exposed to just has not been on, it hasn't been in the forefront. It hasn't been taught to me. It hasn't been shown to me. I haven't been exposed to it. So part of my mission is to bring light to those things that may be at an extreme on a spectrum to one person in a way that's just more like digestible, piece by piece. So if you could first, the first thing that I would like to hear from you is just like, what is your definition of sex positivity? You mentioned your mission is to spread the good gospel of sex positivity.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, it does include what you were talking about. It includes, communication. It includes sexuality just being something that we can talk about, like, "I'm having coffee." Like, it needs to be normalized and not just this blown up "Oh my gosh, they're having sex. Oh my gosh, they just went to a sex club. Oh my gosh, they had a threesome. Ah, they're gay. I don't know what to do with myself, la, la, la." Or they have intellectual or developmental diversity, and, they are someone would say has the brain of a 4-year-old, which is infantilizing somebody, number 1, and the body of a 17-year-old. Well, that person is developing and has needs for touch, needs to be held, needs sexual needs even, and that needs to be okay. So, it's making sure that sexuality is part of our human experience, that everybody gets to have it, and that everybody gets to have it in a healthy way, so that you don't have to so that we don't butt up against each other, and negative encounters happen, rape happens, like a variety of other horrible things happen when people are not grounded in the fact that they do deserve healthy sexual relational situations. So
That's one of the more well put together definitions of sex positivity that I've heard, because it does include the word healthy, not in the sense of protecting yourself from the outcomes of sex, like STIs. The way that you mentioned it, when we talk about communication and being able to prevent, minimize things like assault, and having the communication to even the words and the language to say, "Hey, I was sexually assaulted. I was touched here. These things happen." Because again, even with sex positivity, I think that the general social media captures it, and they box it into just, oh, I can have sex with whoever I want to have sex with, whenever I want, however I want. And if that's someone's definition, then yay. But I think that in saying that, the people who hear that completely miss out on these critical elements that prevent things like childhood sexual assault, or for any type of abuse that can occur. And I'm thinking like on the extremes that the general public just might be missing out on, but there are other things as well. So thank you for that definition of sex positivity.
yeah.
How did you come to that conclusion for what your definition of sex positivity is?
Whoa.
Because, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that's just like I've never been asked that question, but that is a huge I think as you said that, what hit me was so about 12 years ago, I ran into polyamory. And that was through I'm happy to tell this story, but my kid's dad kind of introduced me to it, not because he wanted it, but because he saw in me, because I was a cheater. I was a serial cheater on every single monogamous relationship that I was in, and my kiddo's dad handed me the book The Ethical Slut, and he said, "I think this is you." And I read it, and I was like, holy cow, I did not know that that was even a possibility. You're right. That is me. The Ethical Slut is kind of the Bible for ethical non-monogamy. If you don't know it, look it up. It's amazing. Um, and he said, "I'm not polyamorous. I really feel I'm monogamous." And so we needed to we divorced, we co-parented, we are still really great friends. My kiddo is 22. graduated, has a great example of what a monogamous relationship looks like, and a fabulous marriage, has a great example of what a polyamorous relationship situation looks like. So, yay for that. But polyamory, I think, was the thing that introduced me to sex positivity because I really had to start feeling into what do relationships mean to me? What does sexuality mean to me? How do I feel about it just on my own, in my own body, as opposed to how culture, family, religion, all of those things that get put on top of us when we're younger that make us think that that's what we believe, like that make us think that indoctrinate us, or at least indoctrinated me into monogamy. And that was the only way to have a healthy relationship. Indoctrinated me into thinking that sex was something that I just had to give up to a man. So all of those things kind of converged together to get me to a place where I deserve a sex life that I'm in control of and that I can and the gift of sex to someone that I love is a gift. And I also don't have to give it all the time. But I deserve a healthy one, and so does every other human being on this planet. So I think that was probably the doorway in for me. I'm sure I wouldn't have gotten here without polyamory.
Yeah, well, thank you for that because I think that a lot of people are introduced to, I don't want to say introduced to sex positivity through non monogamy or polyamory, but for people who recognize that they are, that they cheat, right? Like, I don't think a lot of people who do cheat take the time to reflect on, okay, I am cheating. Why am I cheating? What does this mean? What are my options, right? And the
Right.
only solution to someone who cheats is I have to stop cheating. Right? This is what's brought in front of them. And, as someone who cheats, it's a cheater, right? Like, I don't think that based on how you just explained things, I don't think that being a cheater was actually part of your identity. It was just a thing that happened, a thing that you did. And when you were willing to look at it, it was like, oh, okay, well, there's something more aligned for the way that I choose to do relationships. And
Yeah.
so, like, it's still possible to like cheat in polyamory and
Oh,
non-monogamy. And
100%.
so, yeah, yeah, yeah. And your exposure to the solution to the suffering created through cheating was information, right? And I say this because I think that there might be someone who's resistant to um accepting that maybe they're different. And I wonder if this was something for you. Like, did you struggle to accept that you were different, or were you just like, oh my God, like this answers all my questions? Was there relief to it once you read the book, The Ethical Slut, and you learned about the fact that you just more so identify as polyamorous than monogamous? And now the problems that were being created from your cheating and being monogamous when you're really not were now gone away.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, totally. And I have to say that, like, when I was cheating, it wasn't, I mean, I felt so guilty, and I also like, cheating, I know creates distance, right? I mean, it's like, so my relationship with someone that I loved, I mean, we went to grad school together, we were such good friends, and also had a marriage for a while that was, reasonable, but once I start cheating, that distance starts growing. I start getting more guilty, I start not connecting, and then I would meet someone new that I was really, like, excited and had heart connection with, and this is love, and then I would do that cheat and feel bad about this other relationship. So when I discovered polyamory through my amazing husband who, like, recognized me, I mean, I really have to give props to him because he wanted to live his best life and he wanted me to live my best life too, and which is the most loving thing I can think of someone, right?
Yes.
So he does that, and then all of a sudden, you're right, that is who I am. And not to say, again, I don't think polyamory is better than monogamy. It's just they are what they are, and people land where they land. And
Yeah.
so I was just so excited about the opportunity that now I can actually have these head heart connections with multiple people without cheating. Like, mind
Mhm.
blown. It was
Mhm. And this kind of goes back to like my exposure to things, right? Like I might have eventually found myself into kink or non-monogamy settings, and I'm learning like, oh, there's all this language, there's all these things that are normal that have, I just, why doesn't everybody know about this? Why don't more monogamous people know about this? And I wonder, had you been exposed to the content of the ethical slut sooner, how would your life look different, right? And I think that this is something useful for everyone, because had you known that the way that you were in relationships, there was a way to go about communicating it, maybe you would have been in relationships that were more aligned. And you have a beautiful relationship now with your ex-husband, you co-parented well, you have children,
Just
children.
one. Yeah.
Okay, so a child that
Yeah.
you've now raised into adulthood, of course. Um, but had you had this information way sooner, you and your husband would have been able to identify that you were incompatible in this area and then make a decision to move forward from there. And the question in this is, how, it's not like how different, but like how much guilt would you have been free from? Of course, like you might have not had a lot of the life lessons that you have. Yeah, we can say that, but you would have learned different things that were more aligned much sooner had you had this content sooner, right?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, I would, and like you said, separating out the fact that I have a great kid and I wouldn't have him otherwise, separating out the fact that I have a lovely ex-husband and da da da. But if I was going to talk to my younger self or someone younger who's struggling now, um, you know, I it would have been magic for me to actually know that I wasn't different. Like I'm whatever. I'm unique. We all are. But I was not so off base that I was broken, which is what I felt. I felt broken. I felt like not right. Something's wrong with me that I cannot maintain a monogamous relationship the way that I see everybody else doing. Who knows what's going on in anybody else's relationship, but that's what I saw. I would have not felt so broken, and I would have been able to look internally earlier. I would have been able to do that, what do I want, regardless of what society wants from me, regardless of what my family wants from me, regardless of what religion wants from me, culture wants from me, any of those things wants from me, what do I want?
Yeah.
So
Oh, I thought you were gonna say something else.
no, no, that's it. I
Okay.
think.
All right. This kind of puts us in a good place to talk about something that's a little bit more heavy. I know that the general vanilla population kind of lumps non-monogamy and those relationships under the category of freaky people, right? Or kinky or into BDSM, right? Is that something that you've heard too?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and if you say you're polyamorous to certain people, I'm just gonna say, in my experience, generally cis white men, if I say this and they're monogamous, they will just be like, "Oh, she'll fuck me in a heartbeat," and that's not true. Won't
Yeah. Yeah. So, with that being said, there's also this idea that our traumas kind of become our turn ons, or there's some type of an association with that. And
Yes.
so, I'm just curious about like your earlier experiences with sexuality. Like, were there ever signs that you might have been polyamorous or different in a sense? So, if we can just go into some of your earlier sexual experiences and talk about how, if there is a connection there, what might they be?
Sure. So I think, I mean, when I look back, I think that I knew that I was polyamorous very early. Like when I was as a young kid, and I'm thinking 5, 6, 7 years old, I always imagined that my life would involve living with a huge bunch of friends in this house and we all did art together and we played together, and like in my mind that was what it was, and that's kind of how it feels now. Like I have the same feeling now that I had when I was 5, 6 or 7 about the relationships that I would have. So that's really, I think, why I believe that I am essentially polyamorous. All of that said, I had The first time I had sex was very early. I was really into relationships were very important to me, and it was always head heartfelt. I had sex at 14 for the first time with, a friend. I was in the theater, and with someone who was in a play with me. I am still very good friends with that person. We just recently did a play together at the beginning of this year, or beginning of this month. So, someone that I'm still very involved with, and that I love dearly. And so it was a really good, positive experience. Um, I'm guessing kind of what you're touching on though is I had a pretty negative experience 6 months later. I was raped, by a cab driver in Chicago, and, that was a horrific experience that I didn't talk about to anyone, including my parents. Like, no one knew about this and didn't find out about this until maybe 20 years ago, and I'm 60 now. So, like, it took that long for that story to come out. So, I was raped by a cab driver about 6 months after my very positive sexual experience, and, the result of that was I ended up with herpes, which I also had to take care of by myself because I could not communicate to my mom or anybody, my dad, anybody around me, that I had been raped or that I was sexually active. So a lot of trauma around there, that I since then have dealt with, but didn't realize at the time how traumatic that actually was. Um, I think that did probably feed into some of my guilt around sex, and maybe even some of my guilt around cheating, so
Yeah, thank you for being willing to talk about that because I on the other side of this and being a man, I think oftentimes it's very belittled the experiences that not only women have or some of the fears that generally men don't have to think about,
Mhm.
but also understanding the emotions that come with, like, it's not as simple as damn, someone had sex with you and you didn't want it. Like, thinking about that as a man, the way that society conditions us, is like, wait a minute, you didn't want to have sex. What's wrong with you?
Mhm.
Right. So if that were to be flip flop, they'd make it sexualize or like make it sexy, whereas this isn't a sexy thing. And then also the fact that you're also 14 years old and this was an older person. Uh, this, I would like to understand how, as men, like, what kind of allyship, what kind of support, first off, did you seek out at that time, or was there you just didn't tell anybody? And then what would have been something that could have been helpful to you and supportive from a man around you? I have a lot of questions under this umbrella
Mhm.
that kind of, maybe you'll be able to answer them if I just like say what they are, right? Like, what would support have looked like for you,
Uh-huh.
uh, as far as not, saying anything like, I understand that, but if there's a way that you would be able to speak to from your own experience, why you might not have said anything, why you might not have sought out support, and then what some of your sexual experiences looked like after that. And I'll stop there. And then if, I have more questions, I can just
Yeah.
ask.
So, so let's start with, why I didn't say anything and why I didn't seek support at all, is we're talking this was 1979, so, uh, it was just this was being raped was a woman's fault or a girl's fault, and so if I had said something, um, I would have been challenged about it. I would have had to relive it over and over again. The stories, about what that, or at least I understood that that meant that I was the sexual deviant here that was doing something bad. And I was also a very good girl. I was a straight A student. I did all of the things. And so of course I can't be bad, and I also can't be diseased. So getting herpes and having to go to figure out a way to plan parenthood on my own, where they actually helped me out and, gave me the medications that I needed at the time, to handle it. But still, that was just a one-off, kind of go to Planned Parenthood, get a solution for this thing that I would have to deal with over time pretty regularly, at that time, because I didn't know how to deal with it very well. Um, so in any case, that's why I didn't say anything for a long time. Um, what would have looked like support, I think, exists more now than it did then. So I think there is support out there now. There's things like this podcast here where people are starting to talk about um, these kinds of situations and provide that kind of support. Um, I think it would have felt like support if my family could have seen that there was something wrong. I mean, there was clearly something off from me after this stuff happened, right? And I did start acting out a lot. Like, I once that happened, I was off and rolling with, having sex with anybody that I could find. Like, I was hyper sexualized after this. And they knew it. I mean, they couldn't have missed that. As a parent, I can look back and go, if my kiddo had started behaving like that, I would have brought him in and said, "Hey, baby, what's up?" Um, they never did that. It was, "Everything's fine, let's gloss it over." I'm from a Southern family, so there's that. Um, you know, that culture. But in any case, that would have looked like support. I you know, I'm gonna say the way that my kiddo's dad, I'm gonna name him because it's just too much to say, and he's fine with it. His name's Joel. So, Joel, the way that Joel was supportive of me in recognizing, even before I did, that I was not living authentically. That would have looked like that kind of man would have been a man that would have shown me the right kind of support. Someone who could just see who I was without judging it, name it, and let me own it with love. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So what I hear in that is to have been seen just as like for someone to have been able to just point out the inconsistencies, right? Like, okay, you're a 14-year-old girl who was
Yeah,
our 14-year-old girl, straight A student, good girl, right? And
yeah,
all of a sudden there's a shift and you're now having sex with any and everybody and you're still, 14, now 15, over the years, like
yeah,
to have noticed something happened and to be able to just grab you and be like, hey, clearly something happened. What is it? And
yeah,
then your response, whether that would have been nothing happened at all, right? To become avoidant. These were things that you wish that people could have picked up on.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And this is, one of the biggest frustrations about sexuality education that I think people miss is because you had language, had the people around you had the education to be able to recognize like, hey, my 14-year-old, yeah, they're going through puberty, right? Like that might be what
Absolutely,
it
yeah,
was dismissed as, right?
yeah,
But I mean, people go through a lot more than puberty, especially, and that was in 1979, right? And here in 2024, we have technology, we have access, people, it's not just a cab driver now, right? It's people that you meet on the internet. It's people who are thumb swipes away, right? And we just don't have a collective acceptance for the possible realities of not just oh, things happen, but like worst possible case scenario extremes are possible, and then of course best case possible extremes are possible. But we have to be able and willing to give the tools to everyone involved to be able to have discernment, to be able to have language, to be able to, recognize this is healthy, this is unhealthy, right? This is more safe, this is less safe. This person, these people, the all of this is very much part of the conversations that need to be had in sex positivity as well and sex education. Sex positivity seems to be exclusively about pleasure. So the people on the other side of it who don't really understand it are like, oh, all y'all want to do is have sex. Whereas when we talk about the safety component, right, then we miss out on a lot of in between.
yeah,
So Oh, do you have anything else to say about this before I go on to my
No, no,
one?
no, that's great what you just
Okay.
said. Yeah.
Okay. Um, so to be seen, the solution here would have been to be seen, to have had the inconsistencies pointed out to you. And I'm wondering, from family during like the teen rebellion years, right? That might have looked one way. It could look annoying, but you in that moment, whatever your response would have been, at this point in time that it would have helped. It would have changed something. It would have done something for you.
Yes, absolutely. That definitely would have done something to have someone just point it out, ask me a question, and then just be there and don't, you know, over time
Mhm.
continue to ask those questions if you don't get an answer, just be able to hold some space and say, I see that there's a difference. If you want to talk about it, let's talk about it.
Mhm. Now, you were able to treat having gotten herpes from your sexual assault quickly by going to Planned Parenthood and getting medication, but there wasn't a treatment for navigating the sexual assault. People generally assume that people who have herpes got it because they were promiscuous, and you got it. I don't even want to call this person a sexual partner, right? You had one sexual partner prior to having
Right.
been assaulted by someone.
Yeah.
And so, how did this shape your perception of yourself at all? If it did change or shape anything. Like I imagine that the herpes wasn't as significant as the assault, but
Yeah. I don't, well, there's, for a while, and then this is not true for me now, but for a while there was something about like, well, I didn't get herpes from being sexually promiscuous. I got it because I was assaulted. So, I mean, there's some level of like, not my fault, right? Not my fault for getting herpes because I was sexually assaulted, as opposed to being promiscuous and getting herpes from that, right? Of course, at this point in my life, that is such, uh, that is just such a weird way of thinking. But in any case, we get it however we get it. Um, and promiscuity, which I think tends to, women tend to get that label more than men do, or at least in my generation. Um, Sure. I mean, if you want to say I've had multiple sexual partners and I've been married twice and I have I lived with a triad and I have multiple partners through polyamory, you could say I'm promiscuous, I guess. Um, I can own the word slut, that's fine. But eh, I've I've kind of in my head gotten rid of that word as a negative. Like I am safe with the people that I am with. I have sex the way that I wanna have it with the people that I wanna have it with, and that wanna have it with me. Um, but that's not the baseline of my relationships. Like, just as you were talking about, the baseline of my relationships is head and heart connection. It's love in that way, and expansive love because, of the huge community that I have. So,
yeah.
yeah,
It's funny. This isn't funny, but I don't like to say it's funny. Like the conversation is shifting the way that it is, but it is kind of funny that you, as a 5, 6, 7-year old, like envisioned this life for yourself. At 60, right? You wanted to live with people around you that you care about, that you love, right? And people will, let you, as a 5, 6, 7-year old, say, I want to live in a community and live with all my friends. It's like, oh, that's cute. But then, like, you become an adult and it's like you're doing that and it's polyamory. And now it's like, oh my God, like, this is the worst, right? And it's just, that's the funny part. All right. So you do get the humor in it,
funny,
right?
yeah.
And you didn't have language. This was just like an internal drive for you. Like you knew that you wanted to have this life, and here you are now living this life.
Right.
Granted, the stuff in between, right? The
The
sexual
road that
assault,
got me
the
here, yeah.
cheating.
Yeah,
Yeah, like imagine a smoother road to that destination and what that could look like without it being at the expense of your well-being. You said something just now. You were said, how I heard it was that safety and pleasure and choice are really what make up your connections now. And I wonder just how healing this has been for you, because we see safety and we think like physical safety, but
Yeah.
there's also the mental, emotional, spiritual, social safety components that now make up your community, and the pleasure component. And I hate that people only lock in the word pleasure with sex, because pleasure is so much more than that. Like people you just feel good around, people that, allow for you to be free to be yourself. There's pleasure in that. There's pleasure in this level of intimacy where someone sees you as you are, at your worst, at your best, and you're not really seen any different. You're just who you are, right? So, given that these things make up your connections now, I wonder how healing this is and has been to the harm that was done to you and the perpetual harm that you might have created for yourself through the relationships and cheating and just like not really knowing who you are.
Oh gosh, that is such a good question. So you mentioned the word safety, and it was just within this last year that I walked into the house where I live with my nesting partner, and I had this sensation of safety that I in my body that I had never in my life experienced, I don't think. Like I didn't recognize it until I recognized that this is what safety feels like. Like, I just walked in and I knew I was home. And this is a house that I have lived in for 2.5 years. So it's not like a house that I've lived in for a really long time. It's just, I walked in and I was like, because I knew the person that was here sees me, recognizes me, loves me. Um, oh my God, I'm gonna tear up about it. It was it was huge. And so yeah, this journey has truly brought me to a space where finally at 60, that has happened. Well, 59 at that point. That that happened. Um, oh my gosh. Yeah, I go back there and it's just like, blah. Um, and I think part of it too was like about 8 or 9 years ago, I made this decision that I was going to get back to original Mel, is what I called it. Back to original Mel. And so my thought around that was I want to get back to the person that I was before, like I've talked about a lot. Society, culture, religion, family, all those things get put on us, and then we have that belief that that is who we are. So I wanted to get back to that person before all of this stuff. And when I recognized the first time that I felt like I could ask for what I wanted and get it without shame and be supported. The last time that I truly felt that, I was probably 5 or 6 years old. And so I went back to just gotta get back to who that person is. And so that was a process um, therapy, of course, going to a lot of sex positive workshops, oddly enough. And in fact, there was a workshop that I did called Adoring the Feminine, which was about, women partner it was very gendered, so and I am bisexual, so I understand, the levels of things. This would not work for everybody, but certainly worked for me. Um, uh, Women were partnered with a male presenting person, and then we are supposed to ask for what we want of this person, and it can be anything, right? And then they are at will to say yes or no based on their boundaries and their consent. So wide variety of things, but you have to be pretty soul searching to know what to ask for, because I had a habit of asking for what I thought they wanted, right? So ask for what they want because then you'll get it, right? Instead, feel into asking for what I want and then see if I can get it, right? Or see if they're willing to do it. And so for me, it was things like asking for, you know, tell me a story that you like to share with people that you know. I mean, and this was like in a sex positive group. So I wasn't saying, can I give you a blowjob? It was more like, can you share a story with me? Or can you hold me? Or, those kinds of things. So feeling into the things that I truly wanted, and sometimes it was, "Can I give you a blowjob?" Because I wanna give you a blowjob, and then the answer would be yes or no, but that was because I wanna do that, and so that
Ye-
is no, go ahead.
Yeah. Uh, so you just spoke to another beautiful thing here that, gets lost in the phrase sex positivity. And I wonder if there just needs to be some kind of a reframe, if you will. Like I think I've heard pleasure positivity, or well, I've said it. I don't know if there's a person who like coined the phrase, but
Touch
uh
positivity is a thing, like, touch positivity is also a thing, which is similar, but
mhm.
I like pleasure positivity because that seems more I'm also part of a touch positive group where we really are more like making sure that people get nurturing touch as they need it, but pleasure positivity feels more expansive than sex positivity or touch positivity.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, well, we'll see. I'm gonna look it up and
Alright,
see if
maybe you
any
need to
names
start
are
that group.
associated with it, right? But the thing that I just heard here is in sex positive groups, sex positive settings, like these settings are psychologically inaccessible to a person who assumes that sex positive means everyone's having sex with each other. But what you just shared is an exercise from a sex positive group that had nothing to do with sex. You sit down across from a person and you ask for what you want. Do you know how difficult it is to, first off, identify and know what it is that you want, and then find the words and the language to, and then the bravery to be able to say the thing and ask from the person sitting across from you who has the power to give it to you or the power to say no to you and make you feel, yay, I'm getting that thing that I wanted and I'm getting the sensation or whatever it is that I get from a yes, or boo, this person told me no, and now I gotta like fix that. And what you just pointed out is perhaps this falls into the category of people pleasing, but in the exercise, you caught yourself, and this is a really powerful self reflection, asking for what you thought the other person wanted instead of soul searching and asking for what you want. And I gotta acknowledge like how big that is,
Oh,
because we fear rejection. Rejection itself is something that people try to avoid at all costs. So if you got this like low pressure atmosphere, and for you to still be like, well, can I give you a blowjob, and asking that in the sense of maybe the person wants a blowjob, they can't say no to that. What if that person's like, no, actually, I don't want a blowjob, I just want a hug, right? The rejection might still hit. Like if they just say no, rejection hits. But in these settings, right, it could be no, maybe later, but right now I would like a hug. And you learn these things, right? So sex removed, take the communication out of that exercise, and what you're left with is, identifying what you're checking in with yourself, your body, your needs, you're communicating that to another person, you're navigating whether a rejection or acceptance, and then the ability to negotiate. None of these things have to do with sex, but the people that sex positive spaces are not psychologically uh don't have psychological access to because of their own internal barriers and resistances to sex as a whole, can
right.
really benefit from this thing.
Totally. I think I mean, I think sex is a can be a scary word or is very fraught in certain ways, in certain areas. But yeah, there are so many great lessons that can be learned around communication. And I mean, like you said, that can be used for anything. I mean, that could be used at my job, right? If I'm at a job and I want to ask for what I want rather than what I think my boss wants from me, how freeing would that be to be able to ask for what you want, be able to hear a no, and still and then not this, but this, would be magic for a lot of people, I think, and fulfill your life in a much better your work life in a better way. Or even
Hmm.
with your kid, negotiating something with your kid. If they
Yeah.
felt free enough to ask for what they wanted from you. Because parents can be scary. I mean, I didn't tell my parents about being raped forever. I mean, shit's it's crazy.
Yeah. I want to close out that part of the conversation as well. So your response to the rape, like, are you able to recall like how, what kind of sexual experiences you were seeking out? Because I've gone to workshops and educational events and heard from a psychological perspective that the healing thing is reenacting that experience and having like choice in it. So like kink being a healing space or mechanism for that, but to be able to relive the assault in a way that you have power and choice so that you get your power back. Were you seeking that experience? Had you had that experience? Is there any truth to that? What do you have to say about that?
There was definitely some truth to that with me, with some of my very safe relationships that I had in my 20s and 30s, where I would wanna reenact some kind of, power dynamic where, they would be taking over me, but I would also be in control of the situation, which is I wouldn't describe myself as, um, kinky in some sense, but that being able to negotiate that, sub-dom situation that happens within the kink community is so helpful. When you know that when you are a sub and you have control because we've had a conversation beforehand, "I want this to play out in this way," and then it can play out in that way, it does start to fix those grooves in my brain that were telling me that I'm a victim, that I'm not in control. It just allowed that shift to slowly happen. But it was with someone that was very safe, like someone that I knew was never gonna hurt me, was never gonna take over truly, without, me being able to bring it back. So,
Yeah, thank you for explaining that the way you did. So, I hear in this that, and this may be me reaching, but uh, the reason that we started this podcast is because people with herpes wanted to kill themselves, right? So I've learned over the years that the core of that is identity invalidation, and that kind of leads to mental, emotional, psychological suffering. And what I'm connecting here is the healing power of being able to sort of find yourself, like recognize your new identity now, having had that unfortunate experience, and you're figuring out who you are through your sexual experiences. And then you learn, okay, um, I'm going to take my power back. Here's the negotiation, and we negotiations have nothing to do with sex, but if we learn to negotiate at a young age, when we begin to have sexual experiences, the negotiation translates, right? So you're negotiating ahead of time, like, hey, here's the experience I want to have, here's the role that I want to have, here's what means stop, so forth, right?
yep,
And through this experience, you're not only having your identity validated through the safety of a safe person to, go through this and relive this experience with, um, but you're healing and you're learning about yourself through said experience. Is that accurate?
that is very accurate, absolutely. And one thing that hit me while you were saying that is, for a very long time, when I was experiencing herpes breakouts and, flare-ups and that kind of thing into my 20s, I would not say anything to anybody that I had herpes to begin with. Like, I would not because I was not gonna own, like, that identity, like you were saying, and that's a lie. Like, that was a lie to myself because it's true. I have herpes. I did not get to a point until probably into my 30s, my late 30s, to be actually honest with people that I was having sex with that I had HSV-2. Um,
Mm,
when and it was owning that, if it was being able to say, "I have HSV-2" to someone and knowing that I was safe saying that, they weren't gonna reject me, right? Um, that I just started owning it, and I have been rejected multiple times, of course, since then for having HSV-2 because I understand it, like you say, there's a stigma around it, and people don't understand how it works and how you manage it, I was breakout free for 25 years, and then, uh, COVID hit, and my anxiety went up. I mean, and I was on antivirals. I mean, like, yeah. So COVID hits, my anxiety goes up, and I start to have breakouts regularly again, even
wow.
on antivirals. I had one 2 weeks ago. So, it's and I'm so of course now I'm very careful with it. I've got a breakout. We're not, sex is off the table for this amount of time until I can, resolve this. But everything else is on the table. I can give you a
Mhm.
blowjob. You know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
there's all these things that you can do. But for me now, owning that as part of who I am feels good. Like, I
Mhm.
don't feel dirty for having this. It's just a part of I also have asthma, you know? So it
I laugh at the asthma thing because I disclosed to someone. One of my first disclosures on a dating app, I was like, man, when am I gonna tell this girl that I have herpes? So like we're messaging, it was on like Tinder or something,
Mhm.
and she mentioned something about having chronic asthma. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I understand we all might have our health conditions. I remember, when I found out I had herpes.
Uh-huh.
Crickets, crickets. That was the end of the conversation. There was no more talk at all.
Oh,
And I was like,
wow.
all right, that didn't go over
That
well, but I'll always
there's
remember
my
that.
answer.
Yeah. So it's something that I'm speaking to now, and I guess like this can kind of be where we start to close out, and then I want to give you space to share anything that you would like to, and then offer you the opportunity to talk more about your work and how people can find and connect with you. But
Sure.
this the rejection component, right? I find that people struggle with rejection and how you mentioned earlier, right? Like, I didn't get herpes. I was assaulted and got herpes, right? Like
Right.
you didn't do the things that you think would give you herpes, right?
Mhm.
So with that said, I see people often blame their herpes for experiencing a rejection, right? So you sit
Yes.
down in that exercise, sit across from someone, and you have to ask for what it is that you need. And when that person says yes, yay. If they say no, it's the worst thing that ever happened to you,
Right.
right? This, in the sense of pursuing a relationship and having to disclose to someone, hey, I have herpes. When people are told no, it's like you walk away from it and you think, man, I have herpes and herpes sucks and they diss me because of me having herpes. And
Mm.
what I'm finding is that I don't think that that's true. I don't think that, because if people like you, they like you, right? And I was having this conversation actually this morning with someone, and the hard reality is it's a lot easier to blame herpes and say, oh, well, I have herpes, so this person doesn't want to be with me, so I'm not going to find a relationship, so I'm not going to be able to have sex, than it is to ask the hard questions and be like, okay, well, did this person even like me? Like, why now? If I didn't have herpes, we would have been in a relationship. But people don't realize, okay, despite you having herpes, there's people who are in relationships where people cover up murders. People will wait for their partner to get out of prison. You know what I'm saying? Like, no matter what you do, they unconditionally like, love, care for you. And people think that because of herpes, they're unable to get to that place. And that's not the case. You're actually exposing pretty early on that this person just may not be the best fit for you. So I'm want to know, what some of your experiences are with rejection, and then having people like multiple partners even who you've told and obviously don't care. Do you have anything to speak to on that?
I what you outlined was just beautiful. I think that that's absolutely right. It's actually kind of a good little, uh, red flag. I mean, if you say I've got HSV too and someone's like immediately crickets, it's like, okay, well, this isn't gonna work at all, that speaks to the fact that that's the person who would not support you through multiple things, right? They would not be there for you. Um, and they're also not your person. That's okay. Everybody's not gonna be your person. So I have come to find settling into the people who are my people is so much better than me trying to make someone that I think is cool or that I put up here, getting them to like me somehow. Uh, Why? Because that's actually not even me anymore. That's like me people pleasing, like you were talking about before. That's like me trying to appease whatever it is that that person has a vision for me or wants me to be. How about me just be me? You just be you. And if we jive, then that's great. Let's have a friendship. Let's have artistic relationship. Let's play music together. Let's fuck. I mean, it's just a wide variety of whatever.
Yep, that's it. I think that this was a very whole and complete podcast episode. I appreciate you again for being willing to talk about having been sexually assaulted, especially at the age of 14. And then speaking to your personal experiences as vulnerably and openly as in the way that you have. So yeah, I don't have anything else for you. Is there anything else that you want to leave the listeners with? And different ways that people can get in contact with you and connect with your work?
Sure. Well, yeah, thanks so much for just the conversation was just so fun, Courtney. Thank you. I really, really appreciate it. It was really fun. Um, yeah, I don't think so. I don't think I have anything extra to throw out there. I really do encourage people to spend some time getting like a lot of this is internal work. Like just get in touch with yourself, get in touch with what you need, and you know, finding ways to remove yourself from thinking that other people's opinions of you have to be who you are or have to outline what your life needs to look like. You know, what do you want it to be? Um, feel into that. Feel into how you want to show up in the world and show up for others and how you want others to show up for you. Um, and then just start that, day by day, see what happens.
Yeah. The concept of identity validation, intention, like I took a bunch of notes here. I got a page and a half of just like things that have been said and stuff that I've gone back to, sharing your story. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy paste this into Chat GPT and get my episode description and outline and all of that
Fabulous.
stuff. So yeah.
Yeah,
So Mel, all I need from you at this point is if you can send me just a headshot. I don't need a bio, but if you would like to have that here as well,
sure.
I'll take that. And then how people can connect with you, and then I'll include all that in the show notes. And you're good with us using the video, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And just to let
Perfect.
you know, like, just to verbally say this, so my website is melaniemoseley.com. Melanie. Moseley has two E's in it. Melanie Moseley. 7 letters
Can you
in total.
say the website again? Melanie Moseley.
MelanieMoseley.com.
And
And
when you say, oh, your last name right here. I
it's my
got you.
last name,
I
Moseley. Yeah.
was like, wait, you said it had two E's in it. Where are the two E's? And then I looked at your name right here.
And
I see what
Moseley,
you meant. I see what you
right?
meant.
Most
Got it.
people spell Moseley Mosley, so I have to
Got it.
always say
Yep.
two E's, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, that's my website. That's where everything that I'm doing is, including the Journey to the Wild Woman retreat that Evelyn Dacker and I are doing together. So if anybody's interested in that, that's in October, late October. So
Okay.
yeah, I will send you that stuff, and thanks so much.
All right. Thank you. All right, Mel. I will. I think this is gonna go up this week for
Great.
Thursday. I don't. Yeah, it's great timing.
Awesome. Yeah, really
All
terrific.
right. If you want to hang out after I do the outro, you can, but I'm about to do the outro. You're more than welcome to hop off of here if you need to go. I know you had a hard cutoff time for us in 4 minutes, so I'm gonna try and wrap this up quickly and answer any questions
Cool.
that you
I'll
have.
hang out just a little. Yeah,
All right,
absolutely.
perfect. All right, y'all. This concludes this episode of Something Positive for Positive People. Please like, rate, review, share, subscribe to this podcast, and let your friends know about it. I mean, as you can hear, the conversations go beyond just speaking about herpes and STIs and how to prevent yourself from getting herpes and stigma, symptoms. We're minimizing stigma through herpes in a lot of different other areas of life. As you heard from Mel's experience, some of the components of sexuality education that are missing can be prevented if youth are offered language skills, communication tools to speak to the experiences that they're having. How important identity validation is, how sometimes like it's important for us to be able to point out these inconsistencies and to do so in a very non-judgmental way for people in order to help them connect with themselves and be who they are. Compatibility wise, like this is something that we talk about fairly often, is just like maybe somebody's just not a good fit. Like you're not a good fit for each other, right? So it's important for you to have these moments of self-reflection, be who you are. And when you recognize that the person that you're with is not being who they are, or they're somehow hindering your ability to be who you are, this is not going to be a healthy connection for you. And so I think that we can mitigate a lot of rejections if we take the time to self-reflect, look at who we are, what it is we want, and then really be real with ourselves about whether or not this person across from us is able to meet our needs, right? And the people pleasing thing is another big bullet point here that I want to highlight, like being willing and able to ask yourself, okay, am I asking this person for what I think they want, or am I actually asking for what it is that I want? These are important. All right. So this is the Stigma Minimization Podcast. Again, we've got September 29th. We've got the Safe Sex Expo in New York City. If you're able to make it to that, tickets are on sale at spfpp.org/events. We've got Herpes Awareness Day, October 13th. I mentioned that I have another nonprofit because I just love giving away free shit so much. It's called Selfed. Selfed is www.getselfed.org, SELFED. And this is for emotional wellness for men. I'm teaching yoga classes. I'm putting up content that's more holistic and inviting for that self-reflection, curiosity, emotional intelligence to men that doesn't exist on the internet. Everything right now is entertaining, it's fun, it's talking about how men need to be towards women and telling you what to do, rather than giving you the opportunity to reflect on your own life experiences and decide, hey, actually, this doesn't fit for me. Our symposium is coming up November 30th. The theme is that the high value man is the emotionally intelligent man. So we're going to be speaking about that because not everybody not everybody has the resources or the genetics to be over 6 foot tall, make six figures, and have all of those other things that people say you need in order to be of high value. So we're going to be highlighting emotional intelligence. We're going to be highlighting the curiosities and reflective points of what your life can look like, what aligns for you, and that's my intention with the Men's Emotional Wellness Symposium. So I hope that y'all will check that out. It's not herpes related by any means, but it's very valuable in my personal experience. All right, so till next time, stay pleasure positive. Ooh, can we do that? I think I'm gonna do it. I think that's how we gonna do it. Stay pleasure positive. That's what we do it. Lord, please don't let this be like a coin phrase and
No,
then I get
I want it to be
canceled.
yours.
Oh my goodness. All right, y'all. You heard it
Yeah.
here first. I hope you heard it here first. That's
I will vouch for
probably
you.
that's what minimizing stigma, stay pleasure positive. So
Yeah.
there's something here: stigma minimization, pleasure positivity. I'm gonna do some googling. Let me do some. Actually, I'm gonna ask Chat GPT. All right, y'all. That's it. That's it. Let me close it. All right. Thank y'all for listening.
Woo.
And